All right. Hi, Randall.
Hey, Anthony.
Working in LA, that presents its own challenges with, and everywhere has their challenges, but in the South where we have churches on every corner, and there's a different sensibility perhaps, but you're raising your children in a place that is challenging for that.
It's the most rewarding parts are the most challenging parts. That is to say, if your children differ from you, you say to yourself, do I need to argue them into something? And I have 3 sons, and they're all about as stubborn as you could possibly be, which is a family trait, and I love it, and I would not have them be otherwise than to. There's no value in someone who will tell you what they think you want to hear.
Right.
You need somebody to tell you what is true. And what might be true is, I don't see it the way you see it. I am all in as a Christian. I want them to know God in the way God reveals himself to them. I had thought Charles Dickens was boring when I was in high school and first read him, and then I thought he was the greatest writer who ever lived when I read him again when I was 30, and he brought up that Dante was a great writer who shouldn't be read until you're about 35 because you couldn't really appreciate it.
Right.
And I really do see the journey of faith in that way. Largely like the when I've met friends who will say, I'll give you an example. John Malkovich and I have gotten to work together several times, and I love him. He's just not only an incredible talent, but as a human being and as a friend, he's incredible. We're not in daily contact or any of that, but when you have the privilege of working with him, you know you're in the presence of a real person. And John might refer to himself at times, probably does, more often than not, as an atheist, and yet he can quote the Bible to you fully, and he has submerged himself in it. He knows what it says. And I will say that Jesus told the parable of a man who had 2 sons and says, go work in my field. And one says, I will, and he doesn't. And one says, I won't, and he does. So there are Christians, people who call themselves Christians, who don't follow Jesus. There are people who would call themselves atheists or would be honest about, I have my doubts.
Yeah.
And everything in their life is consistent with following Jesus. And I'll go, I don't think God is upset with the labels we give ourselves.
Well, I think the way we carry ourselves, we've shared some meals, and you were telling stories about Malkovich. So your first picture to direct, The Man in the Iron Mask.
Yes.
Okay. Not nervous at all. You've kind of been, it wasn't even something you were really asking for, really, and kind of had this opportunity to direct your script. This is following on the best picture of Braveheart and everything. And here's Malkovich. Tell our audience about his preparedness and some things about, as an example of how to be an actor, how to be a person that you experienced with John.
There was a stunning thing about him for me. I mean, yes, I'm a first-time director, and he was already a legend, and he spoke to me as a peer, and that didn't mean that he didn't ask questions or have suggestions or speak openly about any misgivings he might have about the story, but he treated me as someone he respected and could have a great conversation with. I found this amazing. And I'm sitting there thinking, I have to pinch myself. I'm having a conversation with John Malkovich about him starring in a movie that I plan to direct. He demonstrated all of his values in action. So you're always wrestling as a director. You want to get the scenes right, but you've got the problem that if you don't work in an efficient way, you don't get to shoot the scenes at all because you run out of money, and then you've got to drop things that you thought were critical and or thought were going to be beautiful and magical. So if you run out of time and money, you don't get to do these things. So you really want to stay on schedule. And one of the big problems is if actors, if they dilly-dally, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they are intentionally wasting time. Sometimes it's a lack of confidence. Like I had one project, and I won't say who it was about. It could have been about more than one, but we're waiting for the character to come onto the stage, shooting stage, and wasn't there, and calling the AD staff and going, what's going on? And they said, well, the actor is leaning over outside the trailer vomiting. So the nerves were so great. It wasn't an intentional waste of time. It was a struggle to come to. Well, Malkovich was fearless, and he would be early for everything. So if you had said we're going to be shooting at 10:15, 9:45, in walks John in his makeup, which he has done himself. He hasn't waited to go in the makeup chair. He's done his makeup. He would even sew his own things. One of my favorite stories about John, and it's in certain ways tragic, in a certain way exquisitely beautiful. He had a dresser, a wardrobe assistant that was assigned to him for Man in the Iron Mask. And the assistant was an Englishman, but everyone called him Mother because he was a motherly figure. And he was so full of joy, wore a top hat, and everyone laughed when Mother showed up, and Mother loved everyone and would bring cookies, and he was just really special. But he was worthless as a wardrobe person. And John did his own sewing. Mother was supposed to keep things mended, but John would sit and do that. And I once walked into John's trailer, and John was talking with Mother, and Mother was sitting having a cup of tea in his top hat, and John was sewing, and I went, John, what isn't Mother supposed to? And he said, no. Mother goes, I don't sew. I just like I'll bring you your clothes. And John had specifically hired him because he knew that this man was having depression. Wow. And John had him on the set. Mother was John's dresser. When that project was over, Mother killed himself, committed suicide. Wow. It's like he had a moment of joy, and John had tried to save him, hadn't been able to, but that was his heart. And that kind of, that you can be the best there is, you can be professional to everybody, you can speak with respect to everybody, but that doesn't mean you don't tell someone when they're out of line, and you can go out of your way to help somebody that no one else is willing to help. That's John Malkovich, and that to me is one of the people that I could look at and say, I want my career to be like his. I want people to be able to say that Randall looked after people the way John did. And if they do, it's not because I taught it to myself. It was because I had people who would show me the way.
Well, and you tend to work with actors repeatedly, Margot Martindale, and you've used her repeatedly, although your sons said that she grabbed you by the collar and said she needs to be in every film that you do, which is quite a compliment. But Malkovich and Greg Kinnear, Mel Gibson, just working with different actors over and over, I think that says a lot about you. I think it says a lot about them for you choosing to work with them again. You just connect with certain people, and there's a trust there.
Yeah, it's strange when you rattle those off. That's exactly right. I love every one of them, and I love some actors I've only gotten to work with once as well. There's a critical experience of making a movie together. It's a profoundly personal journey, and incredibly intense and joyful. And I hope I'm not being superficial or grandiose to say that it reminds me of the experiences that I hear friends who are in elite military units talk about, the bond that they have when they have been in the worst conceivable places with their brothers and in some cases sisters, and they come out of there and those are the only people they trust anymore, because they know in the most extreme things who you can count on and who you can't count on. And it's been really rare that I've ever worked with someone that I felt, well, our life's too short to do that again. Generally you have the experience of going, I would jump at the chance to work with them again on anything.